Good morning and happy Entrepreneurs Day. Thank you for joining F4S Digital on our Spotlight event, sharing insight and inspiration into various careers, paths and journeys that await the young people who are watching this session at home or in the classroom. We're joined today by two speakers with very different career stories, both entrepreneurs using tech to have a positive impact on the planet and people and planet. And we'd like to hear more from both of you about your journey. To the people at home and in the classroom, thank you for joining. Please use the chat function to ask all of your questions and to answer the polls as they come up. You're on mute and your cameras are off, but pop your questions in the chat and I will put them to our speakers. So without any further hesitation, let's go and meet Valentina. Hello, thank you for joining us, Valentina.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I'm Valentina, I'm the founder of MyCore Limited. MyCore is a company that works at the intersection of biotechnology, design and engineering. So we are a bit of an hybrid company. We do a little bit of everything, but our main work is research and development for the construction of, for this kind of like formulation of new materials. And we want these new materials to be used in buildings all over the world. So that's our aim and goal. What's special about our materials is that they're completely renewable, all from renewable sources, all sustainable, and all made with waste products, byproducts of other industries. So we're really proud of that. But my journey as a founder has not been very linear, you might say. I started in school. I was studying very traditional sort of humanistic subjects. You might hear from my accent that I'm not from the UK. I'm actually from Italy, and I did my school there until I was kind of like 19. I studied in Italian, and then I started studying my university fully in English. So I completely switched my path. Especially it was difficult because when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be working for the UN or be a lawyer or something like that. So that was my initial sort of idea of what I wanted to do. And don't be discouraged if you don't know what you want to do, because you're going to have so many different sort of inputs and so many things that inspire you along the way. So let them lead you. Let your passions lead you more than subjects specifically. And then after I finished school, so I studied something very like law, things like that. And then I moved on to design school, and I studied fashion, and I worked in the fashion industry for 3-4 years before going to do my master's degree in London. And during my master's degree, that's where everything completely changed, and I kind of like let myself be inspired by like new materials and how I imagine the world to be in the future. So if you think about 50 years from now, how do you imagine the world to be? Are we gonna fly? Are we gonna have fly cars? Are we gonna have tunnels that connect cities instead of roads? And one of my briefs was specifically about that. It was about imagining what kind of products and how we were going to travel in the future and what we were going to use. And for me, it meant that I couldn't continue producing and designing things that were meant to be discarded at the end of their lives. As a designer, I felt that really strong responsibility. And that's where I started researching new materials that were more sustainable. The material itself, I've got it here with me. So this is a prototype, the material. So it's made with mycelium, which is mushroom roots, and then it's synthesized in a lab, combined with waste from, this is specifically from the council where I'm from in Medway. We use tree cuttings and pruning and things like that, and we kind of like mix it all in the lab. And then we get this foam alternative. And this foam alternative can be used in buildings instead of plastics and polystyrene and things like that. So this is our goal. This is what we want to do, and that's what we're developing at the moment. Yeah, I don't want to run of time. I don't know how much time we still have.
Fantastic. Thank you, Valentina.
Yeah.
So let's have a quick recap. When you were
Yeah.
younger, you were at school in Italy, and you imagined your future to be a lawyer and perhaps working for the United Nations. And then you pursued your passion in design, and then realized yourself with your skills and what you were being taught that actually you wanted to make a difference by reducing the disposable items, things that were meant to be thrown away, as you said. And you have now developed this material, which is, and you used some really key and important words there. You talked about it being sustainable, and so I think everybody at home has been hearing about sustainability recently. So this means that there is going to be, it can be used into the future. The source isn't going to run out.
Yeah,
Yes.
we are future-proofing our buildings, definitely, for sure. We want to stop using all those polystyrene. So if you think about the foam that you use for insulation, even for food, the ones that your food comes wrapped in, they are all non-renewable. So they will take 100 years to biodegrade into the land, and also they might leak into our food. So we might have microplastics leaking into our water, into our food. The fish is eating it. So that's not really healthy, that then we're eating this kind of, and drinking this water and eating this fish and all the other food that's been polluted by plastic. So we want to future-proof our chain of consumption, and this is one of the products that does it, along with many others.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So you've talked about moving from non-renewable packaging, polystyrene, to something that is renewable, but also isn't going to be affecting the food chain, that it can infiltrate. Thank you. That's fascinating. Thank you. And let's move on to Anya. Anya, thank you for joining us this morning. Would you like to introduce yourself and say who you are and what your work is, please?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And although we can't see the guests and audience here, good to have all of those virtual faces with us. Yeah, so my name is Anya Doherty. I'm the founder and now CEO of Foodsteps, which is a company that I started nearly 3 years ago, right when I finished university. So our mission is around food sustainability, and we work with food companies to help them measure, reduce, and communicate their impact on the environment. So food, which surprises a lot of people, is actually one of the biggest contributors to climate change and the environmental crisis. So food accounts for about 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's a big issue that we need to solve if we're going to avoid the worst of the climate crisis. And food is also the leading driver of biodiversity loss. So it's still the leading driver of deforestation, species loss, loss of natural habitats, also the largest user of fresh water and biggest polluter of ecosystems. So it's a really big problem, and how we reduce the impacts of food on the environment is a very live question. And our approach is to work with food companies. We've built a software platform where they can put in information about their food products and start to understand the impact that those products have, all the way from farm to fork. And then we also offer these companies environmental labeling, so they can actually put labels on their product that show what the carbon footprint is. And it's kind of like having a nutritional label where you can see what, for example, the calories are of a product, but we see that it's important to have the same thing for the environmental impact. So that is, yeah, what we do as a company. In terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis as CEO and the founder of the business, I'm sure Valentina will attest that you know, doing the entrepreneurial journey, it's a lot of fun, but it is a very wide-ranging role, which is something that I really like, because I think that every day when I go to work, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to be doing that day. This is case in point, doing a talk to you guys, and then later on in the day, I am doing calls with clients. I'm working with my team on building our product, and then also doing conversations with investors to try and help them to grow our business. So it's really wide-ranging. It's a lot of problem solving, and that's something that I really like, even though it can be quite tiring. A little bit about my journey. So I did my education in the UK, and I actually thought I was going to go into biochemistry. So I was already really passionate about sustainability, and I was quite interested in a lot of the science subjects. And I actually started off at university studying biochemistry, and I was quite interested in more of the lab-based work. But in my second year, and I think this is again where you should let your passions really lead you rather than what you think is kind of the best or not best thing to do. In my second year, I actually took a course in food systems, and I was just so almost overwhelmed by this kind of realization of what the impact of food was on the environment. And I thought, actually, hang on, this is really interesting to me. It's got loads of kind of innovation that needs to happen there. And I took quite a big leap, and it was quite scary because I had spent so long thinking I was going to do biochemistry, and haven't really looked back. So I worked in university. I then decided to do a project actually with the university's own food service. So I found that, hang on a sec, even this university, which is trying to be really sustainable, they don't even know what the impact of the food is they're serving on the environment. So can I make that my final year research project? And I think that, that was something that worked out really well, because I think when you work with an institution that you're already a part of, so for example, your school or your university, it's a great almost testing ground where you can try out ideas, and you have that space to say to your teachers or to people that are at the place, hey, I want to try this out, and I think this is a better way that we could do it. And it's a really great opportunity to try ideas and kind of see whether you are someone that likes to go in and test out something new. I found that I really enjoyed it, and then from there I just saw the opportunity to do that work with other universities and other schools, which I started doing when I graduated. And then I realized, hang on, I can actually do this with big food companies, and there's kind of nothing sort of stopping that there. I think, another thing I'd just speak about is kind of, I know that choosing subjects at school can be this really overwhelming, quite stressful thing. And it was something that I found really hard because I actually just had lots of interests, and I loved the science subjects, but I also really loved languages and I loved history. I kind of felt like they didn't really go together, and it just felt like this really overwhelming decision that suddenly my whole life was going to change if I picked one or the other. And I ended up doing a bit of a combination of both, which again, I felt like some teachers and some people at the school were really supportive of that, and others were kind of like, oh, you should only stick to one group of subjects. And I didn't, and I ended up ultimately going down more of the science route. So I did take maths, chemistry and biology, but I also added history into that, and I stuck with the languages that I loved as well. And I don't regret that. And I think when you get to after university, the people that I work with now in my company, a lot of us do have a science background, but we also work with people who studied politics and people who studied languages, and you can totally come full circle that the world is very broad when you kind of leave school. So I think I wouldn't be too concerned about that. The final thing that I'd also say maybe to some of the girls or young women watching is I took chemistry in A level, and I absolutely loved it. And but it was quite a hard decision for me because I was actually only one of two girls in my class. So we were, I think there were maybe 15 or 18 boys and two girls. And I hope things have changed now, but I think at the time I definitely felt quite, the odd one out, and maybe was teased a bit in the class for just, I don't know, no good reason. But I think that I really don't regret taking that, and I actually ended up doing better than all the boys in the class in that one, and it really helped me on my journey, and is something that I definitely don't regret taking. So I'd say, don't kind of put yourself in a box and think I have to do this because most of my friends are doing this or whatever. I was the only one from my group of girlfriends that did chemistry, and I absolutely loved it. That's probably it from me.
Thank you, Anya, and congratulations on your achievements in chemistry. Well done. So, to go back, you were talking about an issue that's very high profile about the impact of food on the planet. Can you tell us a little bit more, please, about, you mentioned a lot of key factors such as contribution to habitat loss and atmospheric pollution and carbon footprint. Can you tell us a little bit more, please, about how that happens?
Yeah, sure. So the best way to kind of think about it is to think about the journey that food actually goes on. So if you, I mean, you can take any piece of food, whether it's tomato, piece of meat, you know, a sweet or something, and think about all of the, you know, journey steps that that food item has been on. So if we just take tomatoes, I mean, they've been farmed on a farm, they've then been transported, they've then been packaged, they might have been processed into something like tomato paste, they will then have been transported again, they'll have gone into a retail environment where they're you know, sold, they'll then be transported again to you, they'll then be cooked, and then they'll be eaten, and probably some of it will be wasted as well. So it's a very long journey that food is going on, and at each one of those stages, we are burning fossil fuels, we're contributing to land use change, we're using a lot of materials, you know, etc. So really our task in terms of what we do is we work with companies to basically do quite a complicated accounting exercise. So we'll say, okay, for these tomatoes, they were grown on this farm, you might have used, you know, 2 kilograms of fertilizers. In order to do that, you'll have used these pesticides. You'll have used energy inputs because you might have a heated greenhouse. We'll then look at how far they were transported and say, okay, they're transported in this type of vehicle for this long. Here's what the fossil fuel burn is for that. And essentially we do that across the whole journey of thousands of different food items to then say to companies, okay, here's these items have a lower footprint than these ones, so you should be using more of these, etc. The easiest way to do that is to build software to make it scalable, because otherwise you'll have a lot of Excel spreadsheets which get quite messy.
That is fantastic. I know as a consumer, I've been talking to my friends and family about this, and we want to make the right decision, but sometimes it's hard to know how to make that decision. For example, some products can put a plant on them, and that gives the impression that they're very environmentally friendly, but they might not be. So it is fantastic to have that software and that accountancy system that tells us actually what's happening. And Valentina, it's the same. Sometimes I would like to use better materials, but it's hard to know which one to use. So your innovation is fantastic. And we've had a question through about, to both of you. We'll start off with Valentina. Did you always know, I know you talked about your journey thinking about law, etc. Did you always have a feeling that you would like to be an entrepreneur?
No, actually, I didn't think I was cut out to be an entrepreneur because I was a very shy kid. So I didn't think that I would be I always thought that an entrepreneur has to be like a strong leader, like someone that imposes themselves in a room. And I was good at public speaking because I had to, growing up in church, you had to. But then I didn't necessarily thought that I was a good leader. But then growing up, I realized that people around me actually started seeing me as a leader. I was actually being elected a student rep, both in high school and in uni. And I was like, why are people looking at me like a leader? I don't speak a lot. I only speak when I must to speak, if you know what I mean, only when I feel comfortable to speak. And I think just people started seeing me as that example of leadership, but also kind of like a diplomatic figure that could put sort of like that could coordinate a lot of different people, like a lot of different strong characters sort of together. And I think for an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are out there in all shapes and sizes, really. And you shouldn't hold yourself back because you don't fit into the mold that you think an entrepreneur should be. And also a lot of the best entrepreneurs that I know are actually people coordinators, and that's all they do, just coordinate people, putting them together, pulling resources together and finding the right people for the jobs that need done. Oh wait, I think you're muted. One sec.
I'm muted. Thank you. That's really interesting. Thank you, Valentina. That people might have an idea of what an entrepreneur is or does. So Anya, if we can, we've had a question in the chat again. Did you always feel that you might end up being an entrepreneur? And what qualities we've heard from Valentina about the qualities that she brings. What qualities do you think a successful entrepreneur has?
Yeah, it's funny. I think in a way I did always know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I don't really think I knew what that meant at school. I think I just had this feeling that I wanted to do something that was I liked really creative things. I really liked building things, and I liked kind of coming up with new ideas and seeing how they might work. I don't think I really knew, oh, that's what an entrepreneur, that's one way to kind of be an entrepreneur, but I kind of always felt like I would like to invent something. I had this kind of feeling. But I think, as Valentina says, there's so many ways you can go to that, and there are lots of different skills that people bring as entrepreneurs. I think one thing I would say is a kind of almost essential quality, which is something I definitely didn't have at school. I think I was also quite shy and quite self-conscious at school. But I do think as you grow kind of into the role as an entrepreneur, I would say resilience is a really key skill. And again, it's not something I think I particularly had at school. But I think I've had to learn it over time. And the reason for that is that you absolutely have to be really persistent. You are the only one who can, convince yourself that you've got to keep going. And you will go through loads of rejections from places who say, no, we don't want to work with you, we're not going to fund you, but there will be someone out there who will believe in what you're doing. And really kind of having that resilience to keep going and be persistent. And I also think in some ways you have to be a bit crazy, which is lots of fun, but you do have to believe that what you can do, that it can scale and that it can be big, and you kind of have to really believe in that dream. I don't think that those were things I necessarily really felt like I had at school. But what I did have was the sense that I liked to invent things and kind of come up with new ways of doing things. And I think that that's kind of, a lot of people will have that sort of creative spark, and I didn't really think it necessarily meant entrepreneur, but turns out it did.
It did. Anya, thank you. And thank you for those insights into the perseverance and the resilience, because we've talked about this a lot on F4S Digital sessions, that everybody's going to have a moment where they really have to dig deep and keep going. And whether that's to do with the subject that they're studying, or whether it's when they didn't get that job, or when you step into a new workplace, or studying a new course and you suddenly think, this is tough. Valentina, has there been a time like that, and what did you do about it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I wasn't the best at maths. So in school, I was about to fail maths. Like everything was great. All the other subjects were like top marks, and then maths was always something that I just couldn't figure out. But all throughout school I did extra classes and worked on it day and night until I could finally figure it out and pass the class. And that was obviously kind of like the first moment where not everything came easy to me, because everything else had come easy, but then there was this one subject that wasn't, coming along. And I think it's what Anya was saying about resilience. It's like number one thing in anything that you want to do, because school is a very nice time of your life. It's a time where you're sheltered from the outside world. It's a time where you get to explore things that you like, and it's a learning experience, and it's amazing. And so much. And then as an adult, you think about your time at school and think about, oh, if I didn't know this, if I hadn't known this, I wouldn't be able to do what I need to do as an adult. I wouldn't be able to function even. But again, it's a very sheltered sort of environment. And then when you get into the real world, you're going to see a lot of rejection, and nobody marks you anymore. There's no more A's and B's. There's yes or no's. So it's really important that you don't take anything personally, especially if you're working on a project like this. And it's really important to just you might have to apply 50 times, and then you only get one time. That one time will help you progress, and so you just have to keep keep going at it. Especially for me, it has been like funding applications and things like that. I just keep, like, my daily job is literally applying for more funding so that we can progress onto the next stage, and talking to investors and seeing how we can continue the research and development of the product, because we still can't sell it. We need to get it to a point where it's sellable and it's certified, right? So that takes time, and that takes a lot of resilience. We have to be very patient, but at the same time, we can't let negativity sort of cloud our judgment. We really have to stay with the eyes on the prize. And it's okay sometimes to feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I think all entrepreneurs have had this moment of like, oh, it's too hard. What's important is that you keep moving one foot after the other, even though you might not be particularly convinced that day. You're like, oh, I really don't feel like doing anything today. It's like, no, just, even if you don't feel motivated, just keep moving, because then the motivation will come. So just keep moving.
That's fantastic advice for all of the budding entrepreneurs and people who are starting to think that perhaps it could be for them. And we are running out of time. Thank you both for joining us this morning and sharing your insight and expertise. We'll finish with a little bit of reflection. Thank you for your advice and insight so far. What would you say to your 13, 14-year-old self, Anya, about when you were wondering what subjects to take? You said, you liked them all, and it was a bit of a concern what to do. What would you go back and say to yourself?
Yeah, I think it really is about following your passion and what you're interested in. I think if we've got a few seconds to run over, I think that when you often at school there can be the sense that you have to use your subjects really practically. So I think one of the questions in the chat is, do you use languages in your job? I don't use languages in my job. My job's entirely in English, but actually Leela, who's my co-founder, she studied Spanish and modern Greek at university. She did languages all the way through school, and she doesn't use languages in our job day to day, but it's all about the skills that you actually learn through doing those subjects. It doesn't mean that you have to practically use the content that you learn at school. It's more about kind of, what you actually, the skills that you learn, critical thinking and actually, just sort of studying. And I think that's the same with nearly all the subjects that I took. So it's not like I day to day use my chemistry, experiments or any of the biology that I learned, but it was more kind of what I actually learned through doing that, which was, okay, I now know how to understand information, I know how to follow a passion, I know how to do research, and those are really the skills that you will leave school and university with. It won't be the actual content. And so, yeah, I think going back to 13 or 14, I would say just really follow what you enjoy, and that is the most important thing. And, also I think it's okay not to know what you want to do. It's okay to be shy. It's a difficult kind of, transition period of life. And I think, I definitely didn't think I'd be comfortable kind of public speaking and doing my job now when I was 13, but there's lots of time to build these skills and just follow what you're passionate about.
Thank you so much, Anya. And Valentina, what would you go back and say to your younger self who was developing your skills in public speaking and back when you were younger but had an idea of what you wanted to do? What would you say to your 13-year-old self about?
Yeah, I would subscribe to what Anya has said. Is very true. When I was 14, I would just, again, tell myself to listen to my inner gut feeling about what I like, what my passions are, and not let like my peers, my parents, my whatever like person in my life dictate what I should do, or let them influence what my trajectory should have been. I think if it was for me, I would have chosen to go to art school directly, but then instead I did whatever law and history and things like that, and I don't regret it, because I think it has given me a lot of skills, like we were mentioning, but I wish that I had followed a bit more of what my gut feeling was telling me.
Thank you. This has been an Absolutely inspirational and very informative session, giving us great insight into the world of an entrepreneur and the journey of one as well. So thank you, Anya and Valentina, for joining us. This has been recorded. This session has been recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel. We have sessions throughout the day for Entrepreneurs Day, thinking about how being an entrepreneur can make a big difference to protecting people and planet. So thank you everybody at home and in the classroom for joining us. Thank you, Anya and Valentina.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.